All right. So as sort of a follow-on to the other conversation we were having about HTTP versus SSH GitHub access, which led into a conversation about, well, when would you want to do that? The follow-on question is, well, does my company own my repos? And under what circumstances legally am I protected from my company saying, we own you, and I want to talk about this because this is not something that people will tell you in most boot camps or any kind of educational institution. They don't talk about it because it's not something that either they don't understand it or they don't feel like it's necessary to learning how to code or whatever. I think it's really critically important to your career. So the kind of terse answer is no, they don't own your repos as long as you can prove that you have never done any work in any of those repos from a company asset. In other words, your laptop. So if you want, this is a really important video for anyone who wants to do open source projects. And God knows I love them. I do them all the time in my free time. My ideal job would be working even better than the one I have now, would be working for a company that pays me to do open source. And there are a lot of companies out there that do that, including Microsoft, strangely enough, and Google. But so if your company has not explicitly given you permission to work on an open source project, then having code, it depends on the contract, having code on your laptop or your company computer that they purchased and gave to you belongs to them. It belongs to them. In fact, most companies, if you read the fine print when you get on board, most companies, when you say I am working for you and you use an asset that they've given you, and there's some other areas you can talk about, like there's a follow-on question like, well, what happens if I own my own computer, but I work as a contractor for this company on my own time? Different question, right? And the short answer to that is you own everything as long as you can distinguish the time boxing for that, if that's what they require. But these legal questions they're not on people's minds when they're starting out. And I just want to make sure that people think about them when they're going into, this is kind of timely that somebody would ask this question because I've been on my job now for a month and a half or so. And I'm now moving into things that are definitely in the gray area. So, working on them on my own time in my own computer, I can work on the same things. So let's give me a sample of this. So my current company, the current person for whom I'm contracted actually worked for Tech Systems, which works for a contract that I can't talk about. But so, Tech Systems doesn't own any of my work, by the way, because they didn't give me the computer. It was the company that gave me the computer. So who owns the work that I do on that? Well, so anything that I do on that laptop, anything is the property of the company that gave me the laptop. And that means that they can come in and look at it anytime. They can go through the repos and directories, and anything that I put on there, I need to have authorized. And most companies are so restrictive that they don't even give you admin access to do that. In this particular case, because I am in the IT department, they've given me admin access, and they openly acknowledge that I'm going to have to be doing things on my computer that don't fall within the same guidelines for other people because they're just regular, people in the company, and I'm an IT person. And so that's a separate conversation altogether. So, so does my company own my personal repos on the laptop? The answer is no, as long as I pulled down those repos in a read-only way using something like HTTP URLs for GitHub. And I did another video on that. That's what led to this. So the answer is no. If, however, I have made changes even to my dot files, and probably nobody ever come after you for this, but if I made minor changes to my dot files and I have push access to my GitHub repos, so my repos are read-write on my work laptop, the argument could be made that any update I make to any repo from that computer, that constitutes work for the company on company time and on company assets, and it belongs to them. And somebody did mention that there's an episode in Silicon Valley about this, where Richard loses, kind of a spoiler, but he loses everything because he used one company laptop for like 5 minutes to just commit a quick change. And that's exactly the plot line. He did all of the other development everywhere else, but he did one little tiny commit from his laptop. He pulled the repo down. He did the commit. They didn't talk about it, but that's what he did. And he did a little push from that laptop, used the laptop to do that little fix or tweak. And now, because of it, legally, that gave the company that owned the laptop rights to everything. And so when we talk about this, no, your company doesn't own your repos, but you need to be sure that the repos that are on your laptops are read only, so that if and when anybody were ever to come after you and say, well, look at all this stuff on this computer that you have this open source project on here, and this is clearly evidence that you are participating in this open source project on company times. Therefore, we own your contributions to that open source project, yada, yada. And you could say no, because as you'll notice, there's just read-only access to these repos, which means any work that I did on anything here, you can't even trace when the work does. They could go look at your commit history and time on GitHub and see, well, you did this at 3 p.m. on a Tuesday, and you're supposed to be working 9 to 5, and you've contract, you've been here for 9 to 5. Hey, Og, but you're on by contract. You said you're only working here 9 to 5. So since you did this work, on this other thing, dude, I'm not saying this isn't BS. What I'm saying is that this is reality. And you might not want it's up to you to make your own decisions on this. Yeah. And this has happened. There have been many court cases, at least two of which I know about, the fictional one. And then, there's the Google one. That wasn't so much about having repo access as much as he looked at code. Oracle was successfully able to convince a jury that this Google employee had violated terms of the Java and had stolen the Java source code, and they lost the court case. It was a big, huge multi-million-dollar court case. And it was all because the developer had seen the code. It's a different issue. That'll be in a different video. That was not about repos. That was about being tainted and looking at the wrong source code. We should attempt to change this. I think we should probably attempt to change it. I don't think. I mean, there's a lot of people who don't care about this at all. I know so many people who will just do whatever they want with the company laptop and just wait to get caught, and they'll never get caught. It's not that big a deal. They would say I'm overthinking it, and I am overthinking it 90% of the time. It's not an issue, particularly for dot files. If it's just your dot files, I don't think any company on planet Earth is going to come after you for putting a passphrase on your SSH key so that you can push your changes to your dot files during the workday so you can be more efficient. I don't think any company would come after you for that, even though technically it would fall under the qualification of saying that you made that dot files change on behalf of the company, but they're not going to care, right? But it's more of an issue if you're working on an open source project that could be a huge competitor, or could somehow be determined to have IP value to the company later on. So let's say you're a Linux kernel contributor and you're doing that work, and you're working on a corporate asset, that they've given you, and you're doing commits to the kernel from that laptop. There's no way in hell I would do that. No way in hell I would do that. There's probably a strong chance that they would, if I was doing that in the company and my employer knew that I was a kernel contributor and that I was a well-known kernel contributor, I can bet you the legal team would probably be watching what I was doing. Either they would have given me legal permission to do that work, or they would have just come after me and followed every single thing I did. So most of us don't have to worry. The company's not going to come say, I own your files repo. They don't care. But it's just a good practice to put this in place. I know it's a little bit more annoying. And that's one of the reasons I'm glad you asked the question, is because right now I'm super annoyed by the extra overhead I have, doing this. And actually one of the people in the company said, that's why I have the minimal dot files. In fact, they made the case. It's so funny. It's so funny because this 1 week in this enterprise, the person who works for this company, who doesn't do any open source work at all, ever, is a good person, or somebody I really enjoy and respect working with. It does no open source contributions. Their entire life has been dedicated to the company. And so they don't think in terms outside of the company at all. And I don't know. I mean, I find that a little bit odd because, it was like, so the idea of having anything customized in my bash RC was like, oh no, I just have a minimum configuration. I don't have a lot at all. Why? So the idea of having a .files repo to this person is completely foreign. And the reason I think it's funny is because we're talking about repos, owning .files repos, stuff like that. And to a lot of people out there, having a .files repo just seems silly. To enterprise people, it seems absolutely silly. Why would you do that? Because they're in enterprise. They're so used to just getting on a system, getting work done, that the idea of customizing their environment at all, or wanting to do that is not something that they are interested in. I clearly am on the opposite end. I think customizing my environment is a really fun thing. But the reason I find it funny is because on this stream with other streamers and other YouTubers, I constantly have to defend minimalism in your configuration because, and people want to do this and that and expand all this and use Neovim there and use Arch there and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, no, the person that gave me, the kind of, oh, that's nice. Yeah, this is exactly why I have a minimal .file. So I had a little trip up because my path variable was screwed up in my work environment because I pulled down my .files and it didn't know about the work environment. And the response from this person was, that's exactly why I stick with a minimal configuration. And I was like, oh my God, I got burned by the same thing that I've been telling everybody else forever. Don't overly customize because you won't be able to use it when you go someplace else. And in this particular case, it had put me back a couple hours or two, and I had to defend my decision to use my .files in the enterprise, and I had no leg to stand on. He was absolutely right. If I had just gotten used to the bare minimum install and configuration, I would never have had that problem. So there's a strong argument to be made to just not even put repos, your .file repos on your work environment. But there's arguments both ways. And I have, at this point, I've watched enough people work over there through, Zoom calls and stuff, seeing their screens to realize how totally inefficient their desktop interaction, their terminal interactions are. And when I see that, I'm like, oh, hell yeah, I love my .files. Oh my God. And because I can outdo them so quickly when it comes to just raw terminal interaction, including, searching the internet, everything that's all set up from my .files as well. So does my company own your repos? Yes, if you commit to your repos from a work computer. The answer is yes. If you, at least they own the change. If you don't commit to repos from your work computers, you're fine. The other possibility would be that this is the last thing I'm going to end with this. It's also possible that you would be working for a company that has had, be very careful, people. Be very careful. It's possible you've worked for a company where you've signed your life and thoughts away. When I worked at IBM, and I've talked about this before, but I'm going to talk about it really quickly. And this is another question about repos. But it's sort of related to repos. I'm actually going to make another